Hello everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to the Portimao circuit here on the coast of the Algarve in Portugal as we get ready for the second round of the 2013 International GT Open this afternoon, the third race of the season. And after the wet and windy and cold weather at Paul Ricard a fortnight ago, the sun is beaming down here and we are in for 70 minutes of excitement. The second stop of 8 fantastic tracks in the 2013 season, and the undulations and mid-speed corners here at Portimao, a very different challenge to the one that the drivers were faced with a couple of weeks ago. We saw at the top of the show just how difficult those conditions were, where we saw the races being won by the GPR Racing Aston Martin of Enzo Ide and Maxime Soulé, and then the Valour course Ferrari of Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi, and it is the winners of the second race of the year which line up on pole position for the third. Luca Filippi starting the car, co-driver Andrea Montermini giving him the fist bump as they wait on the grid ready to set off on the green flag lap. Well, if you've never seen the International GT Open before, to explain, there are two classes. There is the Super GT class, which is broadly speaking for GT2 cars, although they run to GT Open regulations, which makes it a little bit wider to encourage some different marques to get involved. And then the GTS class, which is for, broadly speaking, GT3 cars, but again with the latitude in the rules. Well, it is the Super GT cars very much to the head of the field today. Second on the grid then is Miguel Ramos, the Portuguese driver, desperate to do well in front of his home crowd, and he and Nicky Pastorelli looking particularly strong in the two qualifying sessions that we had this morning. So they share the front row with the Ferrari 458 of Luca Filippi and Andrea Montermini. Third row of the grid, we have got a slightly re-liveried number one car for AT Racing, Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. He and his father were very successful in the Winter Series. Could have won the second race at Paul Ricard, but for a late spin and then a very dramatic final lap move saw them being pushed down into third position. But nonetheless, they are really riding on a crest of confidence and looking very, very strong. The first of the GTS cars there is Cesar Campanico, the local man, the Team Nova driver, Audi R8. And again, that car looking particularly impressive in qualifying this morning. Last year's Portuguese GT champion then, who starts the race. Huge field of cars, 28 of them made out for qualifying this morning, and lining up fifth amongst them is another new car on the grid. It's Francesco Castellacci, the 2011 FIA GT3 champion, who lines up at the wheel of the Kessel Racing Ferrari 458 in the GTS class. And alongside him on the third row of the grid is another new entry to the championship, the Ester Motorsports Ferrari of Alessandro Pier Guidi. The car that was looking particularly potent qualifying this morning was to the head of the GTS runners until the very, very last laps of the session. So I think we can expect to see that car picking its way up through the order once the race gets underway. It is, of course, a rolling start, which is why you see the Portimao pace car there at the head of the grid, which is just being cleared now from all of the teams. As let's take a look then at the full field of cars with Luca Filippi and Miguel Ramos locking out the front row of the grid. Then it's Alexander Taukanitsa and Campanico on row 2. Row 3 of the grid, Castellacci and Alessandro Pier Guidi. Row 4, Daniel Zampieri, last year's GTS champion Lorenzo Bontempelli. 2 strong men for Kessel Racing, Manuel Giao and Matteo Beretta completing the top 10. Stefano Constantini and Diedrich Schitthoff. Row 6, in particular look for the Dutchman in the Corvette, and then the drive Porsche of Archie Hamilton and Marco Seefried in his Porsche. On row 7, Kiro Ladigin and Luis Razia, Ferrari and McLaren. Row 8, Dimitris Tverikos in the Autolando Sport Porsche, went so well at Paul Ricard alongside Giorgio Pantano. Row 10, Paul Rosell, and then Miguel Toro. That Seyfarth Mercedes, though, is looking very, very rapid this weekend. Danny Vertman and Mario Cordoni complete the 11th row with Wolf Nathan and Stephen O. Row 12. Row 13, Marco Zanatini and Rafael Unzarazaga. And row 14, Luis Valaba and Claudio Sedanvic. So Sedanvic is making it to the grid then in his AF Course Ferrari. A car that we saw, though, qualifying this one hasn't made it to the grid is the AF Course Ferrari of Duncan Cameron and Matt Griffin, which encountered problems in the second qualifying session a couple of hours ago. So this is the 70-minute race of the weekend, and as ever they have to make the mandatory pit stop during the middle of the race. It is between 40 and 60% race distance, which means that when the race is 28 minutes old, the pit window opens, they must come in and they must make the driver change. Now, the way that performance is equalised in the International GT Open is a form of pit lane time handicaps the cars that have been most successful in the preceding rounds. So if you win your class, you get 15 seconds added to your pit stop time. If you're second, you get 10 seconds added. And if you're third, you get 5 seconds added, and that can accumulate for up to 3 races. So what that means is that Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi, the pole position car, they have got to spend an extra 30 seconds in the pits in comparison to Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli in the Corvette, who've got no additional time to spend in the pits. The Tau Kanitzers have also got an additional 10 seconds added to their time, as does Diedrich Schutoff, who is driving solo this weekend. So that could have a real impact on the complexion of today's race as well. The cars making a magnificent sight in the sunshine here at the Portimao circuit. Hasn't been a cloud in the sky all day. It's going to be hot work in the cockpit, and certainly the controlled Dunlop tyres that they all run on as well are going to be pushed, I think, to the limits of endurance and durability. And certainly tyre management has been a key theme of conversation with the drivers during free practice yesterday and again after qualifying this morning. So the cars forming up side by side as they come down the hill out of turn 13, then around the quick sweeping 14. That will bring them up over the tabletop on to the start-finish straight, and then when the red lights flash to green, we'll be going racing for the third time in the 2013 International GT Open. The pace car disappears off into the pit lane. Luca Filippi paces the pack alongside Miguel Ramos. The red lights are on. When do they flash? As the field all bunches up, getting ready for the start. Rumbling along, fanning out, and Filippi really slowing the field down. And we've got waved yellow flags, and it looks as if we're going to be going for another formation lap. So the start, for whatever reason, being aborted. Full course yellow has been declared as well, so the cars get on their way. The race clock, as far as we can tell, has officially started. We'll see whether or not that is the case, but anyway, the cars having to proceed around for another lap before we get the racing underway here at Portimao. Certainly seem to be very, very slow as they came on to the grid. So the full course yellow has been declared. And for Luca Filippi, opportunity to lead the field round. Now for Filippi, this is particularly frustrating if indeed the race has officially started, because he really would have wanted as many racing laps as he possibly could to have tried to pull clear of Miguel Ramos. In qualifying this morning, Filippi had a 3/4 of a second advantage, and yes, the race is underway. It's under a full course yellow. Filippi had a 3/4 of a second advantage over Miguel Ramos and a further half a second advantage over Alexander Tau Kanitzka Jr. And with that additional 30 seconds in the pits, then he will have really needed to build that advantage as best he possibly could. The other battle to watch for, of course, today is that the new for 2013 Gentleman Drivers Trophy, which has been introduced, which is for drivers of a certain vintage who've never won an international championship before, and that is another battle that's very, very keenly contested. Paul Ricard, the winners were Johnny Larson, who was sharing with Jan Magnussen that weekend. Larson this weekend paired up with Daniel Zampieri and Alexander Tau Kanitzka Sr. And based on qualifying, it's Tau Kanitzka Sr. who has maybe got the prime positioning to claim that honour once more. It's the field weaving around behind the full course yellow. Whether or not we go green at the end of this lap remains to be seen. For now, though, opportunity to just enjoy such a varied field. The Biotech McLaren in the hands of Giorgio Pantano. Well, the Biotech McLaren's had a really disappointing time at Paul Ricard. Chris van der Drift had contact with Enzo Ide quite early in the first race of the weekend, which put the McLaren out of contention. Then Rafael Suzuki unfortunately had a big incident in the second of the McLarens late in the race that saw that car unable to compete on the Sunday. So Luca Filippi, well, I'm not sure the drivers are quite clear about the procedure here as to whether or not they form up side by side once more and go for a start, whether it's going to be a single file getaway. So they come out of the final turn. They are forming up side by side. Are we going to be going racing this time around? Again, Filippi bringing the pace down almost to, not quite a walking pace, but he's bringing them very, very sedately up along past the pit garages, waiting for the red lights to turn green this time around. Field come past contrary position, something like 20 miles an hour. They're all bunched magnificently. And yes, we go green now, and away we go. And unsurprisingly, the field all fans out. Filippi in the Villorba Course Ferrari solidly in the middle of the road. And he's being squeezed by Miguel Ramos on one side and Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. on the other. And it's Taukanitsa Jr. who takes the lead of the race. The Austrian-based Belarusian then who leads the way. Filippi in second with Miguel Ramos slipping into third. Make that fourth because he gets passed by Cesar Campanicho. So the local driver squeezing through amazingly despite that very, very congested start. They're all cleanly through the first few turns and sprinting on to the hairpin at turn 5, which is a prime overtaking opportunity, and it's one that Luca Filippi uses to take the lead of the race. So Luca Filippi, the former star in the GP2 Championship, takes the lead. As further back we've got problems. Unfortunately, it's Marco Seefried in the Porsche who's very much in the thick of that. So disappointment there for the Rinaldi Racing Porsche and Marco Seefried. A couple of others also forced into taking evasive action. Be able to identify just who that was when we have another look at the replay as the Russian Bears Ferraris go nose to tail. The leader of the race, Luca Filippi, doing everything that he can to try and stretch an early advantage, also making good progress. Still racing Ferrari in the hands of Mario Cordoni. We've got one of the Russian Bears Ferraris that was crawling along. I suspect that was Kirill Ladygin in number 64. We'll see whether or not that's the case, as Matteo Beretta looks to get himself onto terms with Luis Razzia in the Biotech McLaren. Daniel Zampieri in the Kessel Racing Ferrari, a real star in the GTS class last year. Spectacular driver is Zampieri, but he's got a little bit of chasing to do now. Get onto terms with Alessandro Pierguidi, as we've got the safety car according to the timing screen. Yes, we do. So the safety car comes out, and I suspect that is as a result of the entanglement at the turn 5 hairpin. So this race getting underway a little bit in fits and starts, really. They've had one racing lap, and it is Luca Filippi who leads it from Alexander Taukanitsa Jr., then Cesar Campanico from Miguel Ramos, Alessandro Pierguidi, Daniel Zampieri, Diedrich Schitthoff, Luis Razzia, Matteo Beretta, and Dimitris Deverikos. So the safety car is out, the field bunch up, and all the while the race clock ticks on. It was Kirill Ladygin who came in trouble, the former World Touring Car Championship racer in the SAP Russian Bears Ferrari, and you can see it's a puncture to the front left tyre. The tyre completely delaminated and the pack all bunched up, and that is, in the scheme of things, not too bad for Ladygin, because although he's had to make that pit stop, he should be onto the tail of this train very rapidly. So let's see what the issue is. The marshals are pushing the cars to the inside line. I suspect there could just be some fluid or something that has been dropped there on the track. Certainly the cars involved, most prominently the Rinaldi Racing Porsche of Marco Seefried, would appear to have all recovered. But evidently there is still some debris to be cleared from the track. So let's have another look at it. You can see the bright green Porsche of Seefried, and something goes wrong there, and he absolutely spears into Francesco Castellacci. Let's have a look at it from another angle, and that is a very, very nasty incident indeed. Castellacci taking a significant impact, and yes, Seefried, the front of that Porsche, in all sorts of bother, lots and lots of damage. Another look at it, and that could have been so much worse had Seefried hit the Ferrari on the driver door. As it is, both drivers out of the car, and Seefried apologising, I suspect, given the experience that Marco Seefried's got racing the VLN Championship, Spa, Nürburgring 24 Hours, that was something that went wrong with the car rather than a mistake on behalf of Seefried. Nonetheless, Francesco Castellacci absolutely distraught. Lots of work for the Kessel Racing mechanics to get on on with as well through the night. Hopefully there isn't too much damage. I'm just pleased to really see both drivers out of the car, because that's one of the nastiest incidents that we've had in this National GT Open for a couple of years now. So the safety car is out, whilst the various fluids that the Rinaldi Porsche left on track are mopped up by the mechanics, who've been kept very, very busy here at Portimao this weekend, because qualifying for this race this morning was delayed when one of the cars in the support race detonated its engine and dropped fluid all over the circuit. So we're going to go racing at the end of this lap. I suspect we're probably not, given that the safety car remains out on track. So we've got the two Super GT Ferrari 458s of Luca Filippi and Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. at the head of the field. And as this race plays out, this is really very disappointing news for Luca Filippi. This is good news for the overall race for Miguel Ramos there in the Vodafone Corvette, weaving around in 5th position. Ramos, who scored one victory last season in the National GT Open, where he put together a fantastic defensive drive at the Hungaro Ring to see off the challenge of those behind him in the late stage of the race, on the track you wouldn't have really thought suited to the Corvette. But this weekend, Ramos and his co-driver, Nicky Pastorelli, have looked to be very, very smooth, very much in command of things. This is also good news for the Nova driver, Audi R8 of Cesar Campanicho, the Portuguese driver, third in last year's Spanish GT Championship, and that is his primary competition, because the Portimao round of the International GT Open often sees many of the runners from the Spanish GT Championship appearing as well. That's why you can also see the very, very bright Mosler of Rafael Unzurazaga, amongst others. So through the hairpin at turn 5 they go, and from what we can see from the camera angle, the fluid has been cleared from the circuit. I guess it's a case as to whether or not the somewhat stricken Ferrari of Francesco Castellacci, which is just out of shot, has been recovered as well. The circuit staff here at Portimao always do a fantastic job, and so as soon as that car is moved to a place of safety, and I suspect we'll be in a position where we can go racing once more. What that means, though, is that almost 10 minutes of this race have gone by. So we've got now just under 60 minutes remaining. It means that when we do get underway, they're going to have something like 15 minutes of racing before the pit window opens. And they have to make their mandatory driver changes. For Luca Filippi, he's got to do that restart all over again. And this could be quite interesting, couldn't it? Because when the race started, Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. was able to get the jump on Filippi, so Filippi's got to manage the pace. The safety car comes in on this lap. And the race that hasn't really got itself going just yet. Now the drivers will be hoping, having had all the free practice yesterday, they had some private testing on Thursday, qualifying this morning. They just want to now get a few laps under their belt at race pace, let the race settle down, get themselves into a rhythm and start running some really consistent lap times. So for them, frustration of firstly the secondary rolling lap, then the safety car coming out at the end of the first racing lap. They've now just want to get themselves underway as we have a look at Luis Villalba in the Ginetta G55. Again, another of the drivers from the Iberian GT Championship, as Filippi presses the pin and goes very early, and he's caught a lot of them running, in particular Alessandro Pierguidi, who could well have a Daniel Zampieri and Diederik Schittoff shaped problem coming up onto his tail, as Filippi sprints through and completes essentially the 4th lap of the race, but goes into the 2nd racing lap. And are we going to see Zampieri looking to challenge Pierguidi? He certainly gives a lot of thought to it. We have got a challenge here as well. One of the Manuel João in one of the Audi R8s, who looks to gain a little bit of ground as they sprint their way around the track. So they head their way through the hairpin at turn 5, and Dimitris Deverikos goes for a late dive, and he squeezes through. He goes ahead of Luis Razzia in the Bitec McLaren, who also gets pushed wide. I've been joined in the commentary box by the co-pilot of the car that's currently in 4th position, Nicky Pastorelli. And Nicky, a slightly frustrating start to the race for you.
Yeah, the start was not really what we were hoping for the whole first lap. But no, the race is long, our car is good, so we are looking to gain some places again.
And in the GTS class, this is frenetic battling that we've got going on. It's Paul Rosell in the Russia Bears Ferrari, who's the other car who is very much in the mix. All the while, Giorgio Pantano is trying to get onto terms with that, running a little bit lower down the order in 16th position. As Manuel Joao on the tail of Luis Razia, and just up behind him is Stefano Constantini, who this weekend shares with Alvaro Barber. So that promises to be very tight as well. They're fighting just towards the bottom end of the top 10 of the race overall. So Filippi comes through. He is pulling clear of Alexander Taukanitsa. Then we have got Campanicho, and then Miguel Ramos in 4th position. And Nicky, what's the tactics from your point of view? Is it a case of holding station or trying to get onto terms with Filippi?
Yeah, definitely. The advantage that we have this race, Miguel and I, is that we have less handicap seconds. So if we can not have a too big gap to Filippi, we hope to overtake them in a pit stop and then just stay in front of them after the pit stop.
Well, in the GTS class, they are at the moment just giving plenty of thought to where they can overtake each other. And on the track, where are the principal opportunities to try and gain a place?
It's not an easy track to overtake. You have turn 1 on the end of the long back straight. If you have the slipstream in front of the hairpin where they are right now, and that's the easy places to overtake. For the rest, it's very difficult. You have to hope for a small mistake from somebody else and take some risk.
There's plenty of risks being taken in the midfield as they all try to pick their way up. There's the safe path Mercedes in the hands of Miguel Toril. He's in pursuit of Wolf Nathan, I think in one of the Corvettes. The pair of them are both in the midst of the battles as we go back to the front of the field, where Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. is being caught now here by Cesar Campanicho, and then we've got Miguel Ramos coming onto his tail. And Ramos here, he's got to be careful. He doesn't, as you say, Nicky, want to risk too much because you've got that pit stop advantage. At the same time, he doesn't want to get sucked into the battle with Alessandro Pierguidi and Daniel Zampieri chasing him down.
Exactly, and then on the other hand, you also have to manage your tires because this track is really hard for the tires. The temperatures are high, so you have to think about everything, not to push too much and not to lose too much time from the leaders.
Well, Ramos might have the slipstream here on the Nova Drive Rowdy as they come down to the braking zone for turn 1. He thinks about it, shows himself in his mirrors, doesn't go for the manoeuvre. But the challenge here that Miguel Ramos has got is the progress of Alessandro Pierguidi on his tail, trying to get onto terms with him. And also Ramos, last time around, he was quicker than the Audi. And they're not actually racing for class position here, of course, because the Audi is a GTS car. Ramos running in the Super GT category, so really he's racing against Luca Filippi and Alexander Taukanitsa. But just to reiterate the point, Filippi has got 30 seconds more in the pits than you do, Nicky, and the Taukanitsa's 10 seconds more.
Exactly, so that's the advantage that we have to benefit from, and keep this position the way it is now, try to win the race.
Excellent.
Going to do my best.
Thank you very much to Nicky Pastorelli for joining us. Really appreciate the drivers taking the opportunity during the race to pop up and have a chat with us. So Nicky Pastorelli then heading back down to the pits where he will be taking over from Miguel Ramos in the car that we can see on screen at the moment, the Vodafone Corvette, which is all over the tail of Cesar Campanico in the Nova Drive Rowdy R8, and all the while that blue Ferrari of Alessandro Pierguidi looming large on their tail. There is Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. second place, but dropping back from Luca Filippi. All the while, Filippi, by the way, is leading the race by about 3.5 seconds, but is on course to set the fastest lap of the race by quite some margin. This time around, he's done the fastest first 2 sectors of anybody, as launching himself wide is Taukanitsa Jr., and they've got to be careful about that, running so frequently outside the track limits as Taukanitsa Jr. tries to break clear of Campanico, and in turn Campanico has got Miguel Ramos lights ablaze on his tail, and this time Ramos is going to go for the move. Surely he hits the brakes into turn 1, and through he goes. Miguel Ramos then up into 3rd position in the Super GT Corvette, and this is good news for Miguel Ramos because he didn't really want to get embroiled in too tight a battle, but now we've got the GTS battle for the lead of the GTS class coming alive. Campanico under real pressure from Alessandro Pierguidi. It's Guidi in the blue, white and red Ferrari who is on the tail of the multicoloured Nova driver. Audi R8, they hit the brakes into the hairpin at turn 5. And Campanico taking a slight defensive line. All the while they've got Daniel Zampieri as well, looming large on their tail. So Sandro Pierguidi has been racing this level very successfully in GTs for many years. Multiple race winner, multiple podium finisher, and he would like to get that car in the best possible position before he hands over to, let's say, Basov, the Russian driver, mid-race, and Basov, in his own right, a quick pilot. At the moment, though, it is Cesar Campanico who has got that slight advantage over Alessandro Pierguidi. And then we've got Daniel Zampieri in third. That is the battle for GTS honours as Luis Razia comes under pressure from Manuel Guiao in the number 80 Audi R8. Just on their tail then is Stefano Constantini and also Giorgio Pantano in the second of the Bitec McLarens as well. So some super battling going on in the GTS class. And there is Constantini, who's looking to try and get a run on the Audi as they plunge downhill through this final turn. They want to get as good a run as they possibly can onto the start-finish straight, because that's where they can overtake, as they kick up the AstroTurf in the exit of the turn. And Constantini's got the run here on Zhao Surely. He pulls out of the slipstream so early as he's got the inside line. Will he be able to make the move stick on the brakes? The Ombra Racing Ferrari is ahead by the time they hit the braking zone for turn one, so it's a place gained for Constantini. That is then 12th position that goes the way of the Italian driver, who had his greatest racing success in the Seat Leon Supercoppa, where he was runner-up back in 2010. And we've got pulled off to the side of the road there in quite an exposed position. That's Rafael Unzarazaga in the Mosler, which, well, they had all sorts of problems yesterday. They were unloading a spare engine this morning, and it means that the safety car has come out once more. So we've got the safety car out again. Now, is it as... Well, it's not a result of this. This is a replay of the move from Constantini. So they kicked up the AstroTurf, and Constantini carrying so much speed through turn 13. So the safety car has come out on track. We're not seeing yet on the television screen, but our timing screen is telling us that the safety car has come out. I suspect that that is to recover the stricken Mosler of Rafael Unzarazaga. Yes, the safety car is very much out, and this is fantastic news for Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli, who we were hearing from a couple of moments ago, because it means that the advantage that Luca Filippi had over the pair of them, which was 9 seconds, is going to come right down. And we're already 20 minutes into this race. It's only going to be another 8 minutes before the pit window opens here, a 40% race distance. So the pack still racing for position all the way through to the start and finish line, as Lorenzo Bontempelli and Mario Cordoni go at it wheel to wheel. Safety car picks up the race leader, though, so to run you down the order, it is number 3, Luca Filippi, the Vlorba Course Ferrari, who leads. Second place, the 80 Racing Ferrari of Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. Third place is the Corvette V8 Racing of Miguel Ramos. In fourth place is the Nova Driver Audi R8 of Cesar Campanico. In fifth position is the Ester Motorsports Ferrari of Alessandro Pierguidi. Sixth place is the Kessel Racing Ferrari of Daniel Zampieri. Seventh place is V8 Racing Corvette of Diederik Schittoff, who's probably the only man who's actually grateful for all these repeated safety cars, because he is doing the full 70 minutes single-handedly today. The other driver who would have done so is the one who's brought out the safety car. That is the effervescent Rafael Unzarazaga, previously to be seen racing in the Renault Megane European Trophy, but can now be found more often than not on more weekends than not out in the Mosler, which unfortunately today is proving to be somewhat recalcitrant. Well, the car we just saw there, now this is where it gets to starts to get very, very interesting in the GTS class. The Seyfarth Mercedes of Miguel Toro, that car in the hands of Johan Seyfarth in the second qualifying that set the grid for tomorrow's race, was absolutely astonishing. They've got an extra 10 seconds in the pit lane over their GTS rivals as a result of the success of that car Paul Ricard a fortnight ago in the hands of Toril and Rengo van der Zandra, it was, who was at the middle of that weekend. But, and this is a big but, they played things very, very smart in qualifying this morning. They didn't bolt on new tyres for the second qualifying session. Jan Seyfarth only did 3 laps. They've got we believe, 2 extra tyres in their back pocket that they can use at some point in the weekend. They've also got a very quick driver in form of Jan Seyfarth, and with the pit window opening not that far away, it means that Seyfarth has got a really good opportunity to elevate that car up the order. The safety car is coming in on this lap though, so it's been, all things considered, a relatively brief intrusion in the safety car as the circuit staff here at Portimao go to work covering machine of Rafael Unzarazaga. And so once more, Luca Filippi has to pick the right moment to press the loud pedal, which he does now, plants his right foot, tries to pull clear of Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. Fantastic new livery on that AT Racing Ferrari, by the way. And then we've got Miguel Ramos, who is under real pressure from Campanico, and with good reason, because he has got Alessandro Pierguidi and Daniel Zampiero on his tail. So the first 3 in the GTS class all fan out as they sprint towards the first turn. It's the Audi R8, though, that has got the inside line, prevails in the lead of the class. The red Ferrari with the white stripes of Daniel Zampieri, though, all over the tail of Alessandro Pierguidi. And then just behind them is Diedrich Schutthoff. He has got Dimitris Tverakos in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche behind him. And then Matteo Beretta in there, of course, Ferrari. As Lorenzo Bontempelli looks to squeeze through and gain the place. That's Wolf Nathan, who he's been able to pick his way past as Tverakos thinks about the dive on Diedrich Schutthoff as they arrive into the hairpin at turn 5. He can't quite squeeze through. But it's one of the characteristics of the GTS cars is that they can afford to take a few more liberties with those Dunlop tyres. As we heard from Nicky Pastrelli, this track very abrasive, and it means particularly that the drivers in Super GT cars, like the Corvette, have to be very careful at managing their pace. It does, though, leave them vulnerable to drivers in the GTS class who are feeling a little bit feisty, as we saw there from the Greek driver Dimitris Tverakos. Tverakos previously finished 6th in the GTS class, the International GT Open a few years ago. Driver is Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. now coming under a lot of pressure here from Miguel Ramos. Ramos, very successful businessman away from his racing pursuits, but has been racing at this level at the summit of international GT racing for many years. He was 4th in last year's International GT Open, just that one victory at the Hungaroring, but then was on the podium some 7 times, having switched from Ferrari 458 to the Corvette mid-season. You just wonder if he'd had the Corvette all season, whether or not he'd have come through to claim the title. So Filippi has put together an absolutely stunning lap. This was just the 11th lap of the race and pulled out 3.8 seconds already over Taukanitsa. As the field stringing their way into the braking zone as Stefano Constantini contemplates making the move on Luis Razia, who very nearly found himself in Formula 1 this year, but for a few disappointments with sponsors. So instead, he and Chris van der Drift developing the Biotech McLaren. Very quick driver pairing. McLaren, it looked a little bit of a handful at Paul Ricard a couple of weeks ago. It's been equally difficult this weekend as Diedrich Schutthoff under all sorts of pressure from Dimitris Tverakos, and the Corvette runs wide, and that's Tverakos' opportunity to pounce, and Tverakos is going to try and dive through. Right on his tail as well, you can see the AF Course Ferrari of Matteo Beretta. Beretta, who was actually in the Auto Orlando Porsche last year in the International GT Open. He and his co-driver Michael Lyons quietly confident about their chances, and that Corvette of Diedrich Schutthoff all over the road, a big slide. Just wonder whether or not he may have a problem with those Dunlop tyres. It looks to be a real handful as we go back to the fight for 2nd and 3rd. Then the GTS class lead fight still in pursuit of Miguel Ramos, but he doesn't want to push too hard here to try and fight his way past Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. At the same time, the Corvette has evidently got the pace. In qualifying this morning, Ramos was half a second a lap faster than Taukanitsa Jr., and you can well believe it, given their relative pace on the track. Again, Taukanitsa Jr. almost launching the car over the crest, pushing very, very hard, maybe a little bit too hard, because it leaves him vulnerable to attack from Ramos as they sprint through, complete the 12th lap of the race, along past the pits. Is Ramos going to launch a move to the inside line? No, he's not, but further back we have got Matteo Beretta, who is going side by side with Mario Cordoni. No, my apologies, it's not Mario Cordoni, it's Paul Rosell. So Rosell in the Russian Bears Ferrari. It's the sole non-Russian driver in that squad, by the way, able to pick his way up past Matteo Beretta, and Luis Razia also very much part of that scrap with Stefano Constantini and Manuel Giao also in the mix. Verikos just to the head of that queue, then Diedrich Schistoff, and then they fan out almost 3 wide, hitting the brakes into the turn 5 hairpin, and the television angle doesn't do it justice, just how steep the drop into the hairpin there is, and how aggressively the drivers must get on the brake pedal. And we've seen through free practice and testing, several of them running a little bit wide as they just tested the limits of adhesion. Still squirm for grip. Lots of mid-speed corners here at Portimao, lots of undulations. That's why we're getting to see the cars really working and the drivers having to push particularly hard, given that this is turning into such a short stint already. The pit window is open for the driver interchange. It'll be very interesting to see who dives in early. I suspect that bright orange Mercedes of Miguel Toril will be in fairly quickly to hand over to Jan Seyfarth. Also right on his tail we have got Kira Ladigan recovering very well up the order from that early puncture. Ladigan who'll hand over to Vladislav Miliv, maced out just a little bit longer. There's Giorgio Pantano uses all the road, quite a bit more of that, more than that in his pursuit of Manuel Joao. And this whole battle is for about 8th position as Diedrich Schistoff running into all sorts of runs. He makes contact with Matteo Beretta, and Beretta goes around, and will they all miss him? He does, but Beretta then sliding back onto the road. He finds first gear, rejoins, scary moment, and he just ran out of road trying to squeeze his way past Diedrich Schistoff. And this is the issue with all these safety cars. They've just been too condensed on the track. They're all trying to make ground as Miguel Ramos is in and in early. No surprise, Nicky Pastorelli, who was talking to us up here just about 10 minutes ago, ready to jump in to the wheel of the V8 Racing Corvette, and they stand a very, very good chance of claiming victory in this race. Next Corvette on the road, though, Schistoff is having to work very, very hard here. He has now got Stefano Constantini up onto his tail, then Luis Razia, Manuel Joao, Giorgio Pantano. Let's have a look at it. Yeah, launching over the curve there. Matteo Beretta very lucky not to be collected by the Bitec McLarens. And that is disappointing for them, because as we were saying earlier on, they really did fancy their chances of getting onto the GTS podium, because Beretta will hand over to another very quick young driver in the shape of Michael Lyons. In the meantime, though, the Corvette proving to be something of the cork in the bottle as Manuel Joao climbs all over the tail of Luis Razia, and as he does that, it gives Giorgio Pantano, the former Jordan Formula 1 racer, every opportunity to try and squeeze past him. Pantano has also raced an IndyCar as well, has then got Kiro Ladigan on his tail, and because it looks like fun, Lorenzo Bontempelli in the Kessel Racing Ferrari has also joined the fight. And yes, unsurprisingly, the Corvette dives into the pits. Manuel Joao also hands in, who will hand over to Lorenzo Di Vega, as the Corvette and the Audi down the pit lane. Yes, no surprise there that there are some new rear tyres going on to the Corvette of Diedrich Schistoff, who will have to do the remaining 40 minutes of this race single-handedly. So hard day at the office for the Dutchman, but one he's very well equipped to do, having been the Dutch Supercar Challenge champion last year. Means that we've now got the McLarens caught in the Ferrari sandwiches, Kiro Ladigan and Lorenzo Bontempelli climbing all over the tail of Giorgio Pantano and Luis Razia. And Bontempelli has got a very quick co-drive to hand over to in the shape of Nicola Di Marco. Nicely evenly matched pairing. That Ladigan, it's to Václav Malevas into the pits, and to all appearances out of the race is Matteo Beretta. Massively disappointing for him. And Michael Lyons, so Lyons not getting the opportunity to show his pace today. The drivers that have made their pit stops, it's not unsurprisingly Nicky Pastorelli head of the queue. We've also had ducking out of this battle, you may have noticed the absence of the Autolando Porsche, with Dimitris Verikos having hands over to Isaac Tukmulu, and yes, actually taking off coming into turn 14, Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. I imagine that he'll stay out pretty deep into this driver change window before he passes the keys of that Ferrari over to his father. And Taukanitsa this weekend getting driver coaching from Tony Villander, as one of the Bitec McLarens makes for the pits, and that is Luis Razzia to hand over to the New Zealander Chris van der Drift. And that's a good call from the Bitech team to bring the car in, hopefully send it out into a little bit of clear air. All the while, though, it is Luca Filippi who leads the race, and he leads it by almost 10 seconds from Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. And Filippi wants to give Andrea Montermini, his co-pilot, the very best opportunity he can. So Luis Razzia is out, van der Drift in. Fantastic to see Chris van der Drift back racing after that horrific accident that he had in the Super League Formula back in 2010. Nicola Di Marco, the former FIA Formula 2 racer, then takes over from Lorenzo Bontempelli. Be interesting to see how he continues to progress on up through the field. And have we had a change here for the lead in the GTS class? There is Cesar Campanico. Now, is that an errant Russian Bears Ferrari, or is that Alessandro Pierre Guidi who has picked his way past him? I think it's Pierre Guidi who has moved into the lead then of the GTS class. We didn't see the move on the road. Just double check for the number there. It is Alessandro Pierre Guidi. So Guidi then leads the GTS class, coming onto the tail of Stefano Gattuso in the Kessel Racing Ferrari, who's already made his pit stop. Now, is that a case of Dunlop tyres beginning to feel very tired for Campanico? Was it a mistake, or is that Audi just beginning to drift off song? Because not only was he overtaken by the Ferrari, but he's also lost 1.2 seconds to him. The order a little bit jumbled now, because we've got the cars that have had their pit stops rejoining in amongst the front runners, as either Tutmulu is demoted by Chris van der Drift, that a battle for position, and they are being caught in turn to have a lap put on them by the race leader Luca Filippi. Now, Tutmulu was an absolute star at Paul Ricard. Last year he had a fairly bitty season, but it was a bitty season at a very high level in the World Touring Car Championship and Porsche Super Cup. So Tutmulu, a quick driver. We also saw him in the GT Open on a couple of occasions. Van der Drift, former champion of the International Formula Masters Championship, as Tutmulu launches the move to the inside of the McLaren. Fantastic bit of driving there by Isaac Tutmulu, and Luca Filippi, the race leader, is trying to pick his way past all of this, and I'm not sure the McLaren saw him coming. Chris van der Drift moves across the bows of the Ferrari of Luca Filippi as they arrive into turn 13, and Filippi, who's doing everything he can to build as big a lead as he possibly can give Andrea Montermini, given that they have got that additional 30 seconds in the pits, doesn't want to be losing time like this, trying to fight his way past the McLaren, which in turn is in the midst of a ferocious battle with Isaac Tutmulu in the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche. So Filippi flashes through over the line, and we should be able to use the Super GT Ferrari power to move ahead of Chris van der Drift in the Bitech McLaren, and van der Drift eventually concedes to Luca Filippi. Now, what is Filippi's advantage over Alexander Taukanitsa Jr.? It's 10.9 seconds, but Filippi has got to be in the pits an extra 20 seconds in comparison to the Taukanitsas, which means that it would give Andrea Montermini something like 10 seconds to overhaul on Taukanitsa Senior, as rotating his way around is Lorenzo Di Viga in the Nova driver Audi R8. Luca Filippi, just see the body language of the Valour Course Ferrari pushing extremely hard, trying to get himself first of all onto terms with Isaac Tutmulu, who, as a result of this lappery, has rather shaken off the attentions of Chris van der Drift as they fight over 14th and 15th position. Are we going to see Filippi in the pits on this occasion? They've got another 5 minutes of the pit window being open, so Filippi, in reality, that gives him the opportunity to maybe do another couple of laps, as out of his car slides Stephen Earle, in clambers Freddie Kramer, two of the gentleman drivers, but also two of the most enthusiastic drivers in the International GT Open, run by Kessel Racing. As running a little bit wide there is Tutmulu, as Filippi looms ever larger on his tail. So will we see the Valour Course Ferrari in on this occasion, or are we going to get another tour from Filippi? It's going to be another lap as he uses the slipstream given by the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche to draw up underneath the rear wing of Tutmulu. Will he then dive out? He flashes his lights. He says, come on, I'm not racing you for position here, Isaac. I'm trying to get through and lap you. And he dives through, gains the place, does Luca Filippi. And he was over a second faster than Alexander Stalkenitz Jr. last time around. So his advantage now is 12 seconds. But the key is the pace of Nicky Pastorelli. And Nicky Pastorelli, crucially, was a second quicker in turn than Luca Filippi last time around. So this is looking very, very good indeed for the V8 Racing Corvette, because not only did they have the additional 30 seconds over the Valour Course Ferrari in the pit lane, but they also are now a second a lap quicker on the road as Paul Rosell peels in. That is to hand over to Roman Mavlanov, the former Formula Renault Eurocup racer. Mavlanov has looked absolutely fantastic in testing this weekend. Paul Ricard, it was maybe a little bit of a jump for him up to GTs, but he's really learned from the Paul Ricard weekend and looked very strong during the free practice periods that we had yesterday. So that's a car that could find itself in contention for GTS class podium. A little bit later on into the pit lane is Wolf Nathan. That is Rick Abresh then, who is going to be taking over at the wheel of the Corvette, which comes to a halt. And that's in from 10th position. Luca Filippi about to complete the 19th lap of the race, and he's going to go for another lap here. Now, what sort of pace has Filippi been able to extricate from the Valour Course Ferrari? This time round it's a 1 minute 45.9. What was Nicky Pastorelli's last effort, I hear you ask? It was a 1 minute 45.4, so still Pastorelli half a second faster last time through. There is the Corvette in the hands of Diederik Schüthoff, currently in 14th position, of course, having made his pit stop. We've still got about 7 cars that are yet to make their pit stop. We've got the car manager for car 12, which is Danny Veltman's V8 Racing Corvette, being summoned to race control. We've got just over 30 minutes of the third round of the 2013 International GT Open remaining, and it is Valour Course Ferrari's Luca Filippi who leads the way, as he has done pretty much since the outset. But these first 40 minutes of the race have been much interrupted. 2 intrusions from the safety car. An aborted start means that we've had under 40 minutes of true racing. And that means that Filippi has really had to get the hammer down when he was released. Alexander Taukanitsa now very much in the thick of the traffic. He's on the tail of former champion, actually, Joel Komathias. Komathias, the former champ car racer as well, although to see him, you'd be surprised that he raced single seaters. Very, very tall is Komathias, sort of up there in the Justin Wilson league of tall single-seater drivers. And Komathias making a very welcome return to the International GT Open this year. Though going to go a lap down here to Alexander Taukanitsa Jr., albeit only temporarily, given that Taukanitsa Jr. is yet to make his mandatory pit stop as the race leader comes in. So Luca Filippi is into the pits. It will be Andrea Montermini who will take over for him. Montermini, the former Formula 1 driver with Simtech Pacific 40 course. He also raced an IndyCar before establishing a very, very successful career for himself in the International GT Open. He's a former champion back in 2008. He was the runner-up in 2011. He was 8th in last year's championship, a winner at the Nürburgring. And he was partnering Juan Manuel Lopez, but he and Luca Filippi, you would say, is potentially a slightly more potent pairing. The challenge that Montermini has got here is the amount of ground he's going to have to try and make up on Nicky Pastorelli, who is very shortly going to find himself right to the summit of the field. So Alexander Taukanitsa Senior, it is who takes over from his son. Inspection of the Dunlop tyres continues as Jan Seyfarth looks to climb his way on up through the order in the Mercedes. It looked so strong in qualifying earlier on. And Seyfarth has got looming large on his tail Rafael Suzuki in the Biotech McLaren, also Nicola Di Marco in the Kessel Racing Ferrari, part of that squabble, as is, I think, Vladislav Maliv in the Russian Bears Ferrari. They are busy fighting over 7th position, although the order's still a little bit jumbled given the sequencing with the pit stops. The Biotech McLaren's very evenly matched all weekend, but Rafael Suzuki, well, he'll be keen to finish this race more successfully than it ended in Paul Ricard with that very nasty incident that put him out. So right at the very end of the driver change period, Andrea Montermini joins the track. So it'll be at the end of this next lap when we get an indication of the sort of task facing Montermini, and also where, with those additional 30 seconds, the Valour course Ferrari to rejoin the race. So as a result of all of that, I would imagine the next time they flash through that it is going to be Nicky Pastorelli in the V8 Racing Corvette, the Vodafone car, which is going to be leading the way with just over 25 minutes left in the race, 27 minutes to be precise. And there is Alexander Taukanitsa Senior, who has got already Andrea Montermini homing in on his tail. That, I suspect, is going to be for second in the Super GT class, although it will be a little bit dependent on where Diedrich Schitthoff is amongst all of that. But I suspect it might not be for a podium place in the race just yet, because the GTS cars were still very much in contention. That's under Taukanitsa Senior, who was looking very good throughout the winter series, very good at Paul Ricard as well. Now, is that Nicky Pastorelli, or is that the other very similarly livery Corvette of Rick Abresh? Can't quite see. Just to the head of him is Alexei Basov in the Mr. Motorsports Ferrari, last year's Ferrari Copper Shell champion, having also previously been on the overall podium in both the Russian and Ukrainian touring car championships. So a quick driver, Basov, and this could well see him prominently positioned in the order. So it is Nicky Pastorelli who has come through in second position, then it is Basov who is second. But look at the progress of Taukanitsa Senior and Andrea Montermini. It's Carlos Vieira then who is in third position in the Audi R8 that he took over from Cesar Campanico, the number 81 Audi. So this is the second place car in the race, and for a newcomer to the International GT Open this weekend, this is looking very nice from Alexei Basov. There's also the possibility here that he could claim GTS class honours. So it's Carlos Vieira in third, Alexander Taukanitsa Senior in fourth. As well, now Taukanitsa Senior is in third. In fourth place, we've got Vieira, who's under real pressure from Andrea Montermini in the Valour course Ferrari, who's trying to find his way past him. And Montermini goes to the outside of the Audi into turn 7. Robust stuff, but through goes the Italian driver. Really nicely judged move that from Montermini, and a sign of his experience not to get embroiled in trouble. But it does mean he's lost a little bit of ground to Alexander Taukanitsa Senior. I suspect, though, Montermini, once he's able to get some clear air in front of him, may be able to get himself back onto terms with the AT Racing Ferrari fairly quickly. Vieira then slipping to second in the GTS class. Third in the GTS class at the moment is Johnny Larson, although he has got a very good battle potentially shaping up with Isaac Tutmulu. Alexander Taukanitsa Senior launching to the inside of Rick Abresh, and you see how tight it was with Carlos Vieira and Andrea Montermini. It's part of that scrap as well. There is then the Nova Drive Rowdy of Carlos Vieira, the Audi R8. Just spectacular looking car, always good to see it on the grid. Accelerating on then, this completes the 22nd lap of the race. And Nicky Pastorelli's advantage over this man, Alexei Basov, is 18 seconds. Then Alexander Taukanitsa, he's just got the second over Andrea Montermini, as this is the challenge and change for third in the GTS class. And it's Isaac Tutmulu who moves to the inside of Johnny Larson in the Kessel Racing car that he took over from Daniel Zampieri. So Tutmulu, who really deserved to be on the podium, Paul Ricard but wasn't, moves into a podium position as we take another look. This fantastic move from Andrea Montermini around the outside of turn 6, gives him the inside line for turn 7. And through he goes, and already Montermini is getting himself up onto the tail here of Alexander Taukanitsa Senior. And for the Taukanitsas, if they're able to get themselves, though, onto the overall race podium for the second race in a row, that would be formidable stuff. At the same time, for Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi to get themselves on the podium as well would be incredible, but it would also give them quite a substantial additional pit stop penalty for tomorrow, because it can accumulate for up to 3 races. So that, as things stand, gives them 35 seconds additional time in the pits. If Montoni makes the move on Alexander Talconnitz Senior. That jumps to 40 seconds more in the pits. All the while, though, they're trying to get themselves onto terms of the Esther Motorsports Ferrari leading the GTS class of Alexei Baisov, as we see Montoni trying to challenge Alexander Talconnitz Senior as they head in towards the hairpin at turn 13. Before the road falls away into 14, now side by side between two Ferrari 458s. You can't ask for much more than this as they head into turn 14, and Montoni tries to go for it, he can't quite do it. Talconnitz shuts the door. Brilliant driving from the pair of them, and Montoni now winds up the momentum. He's going to challenge the Belarusian driver as they come onto the start and finish straight. Luca Filippi watches on from the pit wall, and Andrea Montoni, he should be able to go through now on the brakes into turn 1, although Talconnitz looks to dispute it, but through goes Andrea Montoni. Very nicely done, but had he gone through on the way into turn 14 there, that would have been one of those moves that would have become a YouTube cult hit, because that was incredibly brave stuff from the experienced Italian driver, also one of the nicest people you could possibly hope to meet, always smiling in the paddock. Chris van der Drift is making very good progress as well, and he has got Diedrich Schitthoff on his tail as well. This is the fight for 7th, 8th and 9th. Johnny Larson just being demoted down the pack in the Kessel Racing Ferrari, and he has got Alvaro Barber homing in his tail. So this is good to see from van der Drift in the Biotech McLaren. That car going well. Van der Drift has got a sniff here of maybe a podium in the GTS class. He is 2.5 seconds back from Isaac Tutmulu. Last time around he was a little bit slower than Tutmulu, not unsurprisingly. Through the first sector, they set identical times to the nearest 10th of a second. But 2.5 seconds, relatively speaking, is very little to consider altogether. And Alvaro Barber, there he is, driver who came so close to winning the overall championship last year in the Valois Aston Martin, former World Series Borelli racer, and he has got Jan Seyfarth looming up onto his tail. So we thought the Seyfarth Mercedes would show strongly, but we have got some drivers of extremely high calibre now coming to the head of the field. It's going to give us a very entertaining final 20 minutes here. Diedrich Schitthoff doing everything he can to try and elevate himself on past van der Drift. Van der Drift in turn would really quite like to just to be released to do what he can about the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche advisor Tutmulu. And is this the change for second place? It is. Andrea Montoni has got onto terms already with Alexei Baisov. Through he goes and up into second position in the race overall for Andrea Montoni. Baisov, though, still leads the GTS class. His advantage over Carlos Vieira is about 3.5 seconds. And Vieira a little bit quicker as well last time around than Baisov. So that's going to be a gap that's worth watching. Alexander Talconnitz Senior has also, it would seem, been repassed by Carlos Vieira, because it was the, yes it is, the Audi R8 that's ahead of the AT Racing Ferrari. So third in the Super GT class is Alexander Talconnitz Senior, but he has been passed by Carlos Vieira. Now Talconnitz Senior, if he were to lose another place to Isaac Tutmulu, that would then promote Dimitris Deverikos to the lead of the Gentleman Drivers Trophy, which is something to consider as well. Right, Montoni is some 21.5 seconds back from Nicky Pastorelli, rather, with just under 20 minutes to go. Last time around, Montoni was a second faster than Pastorelli, but that was trying to pass Baisov, as Johnny Larson has a moment in the Kessel Ferrari and fires off into the gravel trap. It's a real shame for the Danish driver, who's actually, of sorts, an ex-F1 driver. He raced one of the Ascari Benettons in the Euroboss Championship a couple of years ago, as we see, driver who raced in the FIA Formula 1 Championship. Andrea Montoni making the move for second place on Alexei Baisov, to the delight of Luca Filippi on the pit wall. Through goes Montoni, and Montoni was 1.3 seconds quicker than Nicky Pastorelli last time through, and you just wonder how much Nicky Pastorelli is nursing those Dunlop tyres, and whether this is a real chase here for Andrea Montoni. As at the current race of capture, you'd say that Montoni is going to run out of time before he gets into terms with the Corvette. But if the Dunlop tyres for Nicky Pastorelli are just going off song a little bit, then it is eminently possible that Montoni could be in with a sniff of victory. So Basoff trying to stay with him. Basoff, though, has got concerns of his own, or he should do, because Carlos Vieira in the Nova Drive Rowdy is coming right onto his tail. There's only 3 seconds back is Vieira. He was a second quicker last time around as well. So we could yet see a switch for the GTS class lead too, as Freddie Kramer, 21st position, seeing off the challenge of Rick Abrecht for the time being. We have got Chris van der Drift's team manager being summoned to race control with immediate effect. So that is maybe something that's been spotted from van der Drift. In fact, it's not Rick Abrecht who Freddie Kramer is seeing off. It is the race leader, Nicky Pastorelli. So Pastorelli powers through. This completes lap 26 of the race. And what lap time has Pastorelli set? It's a 1 minute 46.9, so a little bit quicker than he went last time around. The Dutch driver who raced very successfully in the FA GT1 World Championship for the last couple of seasons, but also, as I said earlier on, in Champ Car, and was the European Formula 3000 champion almost a decade ago, back in 2004. Montermini, though, again, a second quicker than Pastorelli. He brings the gap down to 19.7 seconds. Still don't think that's going to be quite enough, given that 1 minute and 3/4 is the lap time at the moment. So it's Nicky Pastorelli who is just taking things smoothly, controlled manner, but he doesn't want to push any harder than he absolutely has to. But when you get to be a driver of the standing of the likes of Pastorelli or Montermini, you know exactly what you need to do to just ease off the pace. So already through the first sector, Montermini a couple of tenths of a second quicker than Pastorelli this time around. It means that Montermini is pulling well clear of Alexei Basoff, who has got Carlos Vieira homing in on his tail. And they've got Alexander Stalkinitsa Senior, who's also a couple of seconds back, and then Isaac Tutmulu, who is a further 5 seconds back from there. So I think Tutmulu's chances of challenging for GTS honours are gone. Tutmulu, in turn, has got 4 seconds over Chris van der Drift, so not a huge source of concern for him. Right, coming towards the end of the second sector, and again Montermini a little bit quicker than Pastorelli, but only by 0.2 of a second. It means that thus far, with 2/3 of this 27th lap of the race completed, Andrea Montermini has only taken 0.4 of a second out of the advantage for race leader Nicky Pastorelli, and that is by no means enough. We've got a drive-through penalty which has been awarded to Jackie Camp for refueling with the engine still on, but that's going to see him out of 19th as we see Alvaro Barber and Jan Seyfarth at battle, and that's the position gained for Jan Seyfarth, up into 9th position then for the very experienced, very quick German driver in the Seyfarth Mercedes. Alvaro Barber in the Ombra Racing Ferrari loses the place but is still in the mix. Now, what sort of pace is Jan Seyfarth sending overall? 1 minute 48, so I think that's going to be quite enough, as we have, look, Vyacheslav Maliv having a quick spin in the Russian Bears Ferrari down in 17th position. We've also got a stop and go penalty of 10 seconds for Diedrich Schittoff in the Corvette, because he didn't have a pit stop corresponding with his handicap time. He just went straight out of the pits. And Chris van der Drift being caught here by Jan Seyfarth quite quickly. And Jan Seyfarth, it could just be a GTS class podium for him. He flashes his lights at van der Drift. I think van der Drift will know pretty promptly from the team on the radio. This is battle for position. It is for 4th in the GTS class. Van der Drift, though, his team manager was summoned to race control a few moments ago, so it could be he will have some sort of penalty heading in his direction as the Mercedes looms large on the tail of the McLaren. Then they've got the Ferrari of Alvaro Barber right behind them. This really is what the International GT Open is all about. Dream cars racing wheel to wheel, all of different marks, all with very, very talented drivers at the wheel. And Seyfarth closing right up onto the tail of van der Drift, who slithers a little bit wide as they come down the hill out of turn 10 into 11. Seyfarth launching to the inside into turn 12. That's going to be very, very tight. Van der Drift gives him racing room, runs out a little bit wide, but Van der Drift's then got the inside line for hairpin at turn 13. Although Seyfarth looks challenged around the outside. That's brilliant driving from Jan Seyfarth in the Mercedes, and not using those tyres in qualifying could well be paying off for him. He keeps his footing around the outside at turn 14. Down the hill they come. Seyfarth eventually has to give second best to Chris van der Drift, although you'd suspect that van der Drift is going to hold on in that 8th place in the race overall, 4th in the GTS class for only as long as it takes them to get towards turn 1, because jumping out of the slipstream is Seyfarth in the Mercedes. He's got the inside line. Van der Drift, though, breaks very late in the Bitech McLaren. It's not enough, though, to see off Van der Drift, as we have a glimpse of Dietrich Schittoff on the naughty step, serving his stop-and-go penalty. Also gaining the place is Alvaro Barber, so he moves through into 9th. Van der Drift slips to 10th, and that could very rapidly become 11th, because there is Roman Mavlanov in the Russian Bears Ferrari, homing in onto his tail. The real key here, though, is going to be the pace of Jan Seyfarth relative to that of Isaac Tutmulu, because there is just a possibility here that that Mercedes, or possibly the Ombre Racing Ferrari of Alvaro Barber, could snatch 3rd position in the GTS class. The battle, by the way, for the leader GTS is getting very, very close indeed. Alexei Basov, this is off camera, has been caught now by Carlos Vieira in the Nova Driver Audi, so that is a good scrap. This is the fight on going for 4th in the GTS class, which was in the hands of Chris van der Drift until the first turn on this lap, when Jan Seyfarth was able to move through, and Seyfarth already stringing together some very good sectors. He's going to be, I suspect, on the tail of Isaac Tutmulu before the checkered flag comes out. We'll see at the end of this lap just what the gap between the pair of them is. So through they come towards the end of lap 29. Isaac Tutmulu waiting for him to come through over the line. Tutmulu is through. He's done the 1:48.0. Jan Seyfarth does a 1:47.5. And so he's half a second quicker than Isaac Tutmulu. The gap between the pair of them is 5.1 seconds. So that could just be on. So Roman Mavlanov now takes his opportunity to take a shot at the Bitech McLaren in the hands of Chris van der Drift. Jan Seyfarth, though, being momentarily delayed by the lappery of one of the Corvettes that's just up ahead of him. So imagine through some of this twistier middle section of the lap that Seyfarth should be able to pick his way through fairly rapidly. Thinks about launching to the inside line. The Corvette, though, that is certainly racing him for position at the moment. I think it is to put a lap onto the Corvette, and Seyfarth should have his opportunity to do so now to come out of turn 5. This is the battle, or was the battle for the lead of the GTS class, because through has gone Carlos Vieira, so it's Vieira now who moves into the lead of the GTS class. Alexei Basov shuffled down into 2nd, and that was also for 3rd in the race overall. So this a superb performance from the Nova Driver team. Cesar Campanico and Carlos Vieira, they qualified 4th. They're now running 3rd, and they are looking like they are going to translate GTS class pole into GTS class victory with just under 10 minutes left in the race. So they head down towards completion of the 30th lap. By the way, the chase between Pastorelli and Montermini continues. Andrea Montermini is now 15 seconds back from Nicky Pastorelli, but that is not going to be quite enough for Pastorelli. The fight for 3rd and 4th. Sprints across line in 5th place. We've still got Alexander Taukanitsa Senior. Taukanitsa Senior on that occasion substantially quicker than the 2 cars ahead of him. Taukanitsa Senior also leading the gentleman drivers class. There is Isaac Tutmulu next along, and Jan Seyfarth in hot pursuit. Now, what's the gap between Seyfarth and Tutmulu? On that occasion, it was just a 1/10 of a second that Seyfarth was fastest. Instead, the challenge is Roman Mavlanov still trying to pick his way around Chris van der Drift in the McLaren, and they've got Alvaro Barber, who's not exactly romping away from them in the Ombre Racing Ferrari. All fighting for GTS class positions just outside the podium, but also all fighting for a place in the top 10. Alvaro Barber currently in 8th, Van der Drift 9th, and then Roman Mavlanov completing the top 10. It's then a fairly hefty gap back, some 7 seconds, to Rafael Suzuki in the 2nd of the Bitech McLarens, who is in 11th. This is impressive stuff from Roman Mavlanov. As we were saying earlier on, he was very, very solid in free practice and testing yesterday. He's really translated that pace into the race today, because he had a fairly unproductive season last year in the Formula Renault 2-litre Euro Cup. As into the pits comes Joel Comathius, and that is not a good sign. The mechanic's going straight for the engine cover. Comathius unhooking his radio, and about to clamber out of the second of the Ombra Racing Ferraris. Roman Mavlanov just losing out a little bit to Chris van der Drift, whilst we cut down into the pit lane, so that gap between them has gone out to about 5 car lengths, but van der Drift has had now 20 seconds added to his race time due to pit lane handicap timings, so van der Drift, fortunately for him, further disappointment. All the while, Nicky Pastorelli leads the way in the V8 Racing Corvette. 7.5 minutes to go, and Pastorelli is giving away about 1.5 seconds a lap to Andrea Montermini, as he can well afford to do. Can afford to drive within himself, as long as he keeps the concentration, because talk to any professional driver, they'll say it's very easy to talk about backing off when you've got a big advantage, but in reality, if you back off too much, you lose concentration. That's when you're at the biggest risk of having an incident, whereas if you're actually driving the car as hard as you can, then you're at maximum concentration. That's actually where you're making fewer mistakes. And in a championship like the International GT Open, the key is to drive the car at something like 98%, so you're not totally on the limit, but you're as near enough to the limit as you can possibly be to drive consistently for a prolonged stint. Pastorelli plants his right foot, accelerates out of turn 14, climbs up the slight incline, over the line. 32 laps now reeled off into the history books. It's on the tail of Lourenco de Vega to put a lap on to the number 80 Nova driver Audi, who currently circulates in 17th position. And again, the gap between Pastorelli and Montermini has come down, but again, it's not by really enough, I don't think, to concern the V8 Racing team. There you see it, 12.6 seconds. Even so, for Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi, that is a remarkable performance, given the amount of additional time in the pit lane they were carrying in relation to the V8 Racing Corvette. Such an immaculately prepared car, that as well. The Corvette's television really doesn't do it justice. The rumble of the engine, the deep-throated roar, it's always unmistakably a Corvette. And the V8 Racing team, very, very professional. Car always prepared to an immaculate standard. It means that, given the opportunity, can be thoroughly exploited for a very strong result. So here is Carlos Vieira, who leads the GTS class. This has been a very, very good day for the Nova driver team. And Vieira, now that he's clear of Alexei Basov, pulling away from him as well by about a second a lap. That gap has gone out to some 3 seconds. No particular pressure on Vieira. He can enjoy the Portimao circuit, although it's such a busy track for the drivers. It's really only the run along the start and finish straight where the drivers actually get to have any sort of a breather. The rest of the time they're either in a corner or setting up for the next corner. And because of so many blind brows, there are a number of turns on the circuit where actually the driver is beginning to make the turn before he can actually see the corner, which is why it requires such an intense level of concentration. And Carlos Vieira, negotiating penultimate turn absolutely perfectly, heads down the hill. The road really does suddenly just fall away from you. And then straightens on to this tabletop pit straight, sprinting through, completing his 33rd lap. So I think we're probably going to have 3 more laps, including the one which we are on at the moment. The gap between the leaders, by the way, is still over 10 seconds. Here is Jan Seyfarth. Now, what is he doing about Isaac Tutmulu? The answer is he's right on his tail. So the chase between Seyfarth and Tutmulu has swung in favour of Jan Seyfarth. And this is for 3rd position then in the GTS class. Will it be Seyfarth who prevails? He launches the move to the inside of Tutmulu. And once more, the Auto Orlando Sport Porsche robbed of a, well, not robbed, but demoted from a podium position late in the race. So disappointing for Tutmulu. Superb drive from Jan Seyfarth, though, who has charged on through the field. I guess the next question is whether or not Jan Seyfarth stands even half a chance of getting himself up onto the tail of Alexei Basov. It feels like it's too much of an ask. It's about 6 seconds or so, but Basov, when we've cut to the Ferrari, always seems to be sliding over the place. So slipping down then, Isaac Tutmulu. That is now 7th in the race overall, 4th in GTS for the Spanish driver Jan Seyfarth, who was always to the fore of the GTS class when we saw that Mercedes in the International GT Open last year. Clambers up, gains the position. Tutmulu in turn, he's under no threat at all from being further demoted. Alvaro Barber 5 seconds back down the road. As Nicky Pastorelli is already past our commentary position into the penultimate lap of the race. Jan Seyfarth just looking to lap Freddie Kramer in the Kessel Racing Ferrari. That will be Isaac Tutmulu's next challenge. And the Auto Orlando Sport team will be very pleased to be most prominent of the Porsches as well in this race. Because of course we lost the Rinaldi Racing Porsche very early on. We also haven't seen anything of Nicolo Schiro and Archie Hamilton in the DriveX Porsche as well. Wonder whether or not that fell by the wayside off camera early on. So Tutmulu moves clear of Freddie Kramer. Just 2 more laps of the Portimao circuit to go for Isaac Tutmulu en route to what is now looking very likely to be 4th position in the GTS class. But again, they have got another opportunity to get themselves on the podium. Tomorrow we have got the shorter 50-minute race for the weekend. This is the slightly longer race, being 70 minutes. The 50-minute race is always very, very frantic. With the handicap penalties applied as well, it has potential to be very interesting, because with this 3rd place in the GTS class looking likely to go the way of Jan Seyfarth, that is going to increase their time spent in the pit lane to 15 seconds, which will be the same amount of time that Carlos Vieira and Cesar Campanico will win for winning the GTS class. So Nicky Pastorelli comes through and starts the final lap of the race. And this has gone exactly how Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli would have wanted it to. And Pastorelli has been able to consistently lap a second a lap slower than Andrea Montermini throughout his stint, under no threat from the Italian. Although I would love to know, and it'll be very interesting to talk to them after the race, whether or not, had we not had those safety car interruptions earlier on, and Luca Filippi been able to build an even larger advantage, whether or not Nicky Pastorelli would have had the pace at his disposal to maybe go a little bit quicker if it had to. As it is, that will be filed in the massive collection of motorsport IVs, because the safety cars have fallen the way of the V8 Racing Corvette. The race strategy has been delivered by perfection, and Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli haven't put a wheel wrong, and Pastorelli is now just half a lap away from his and Miguel Ramos's first victory of the season in the International GT Open. It's going to be 3 different winners from the first 3 races of the year. It sets us up fantastically for an exciting season ahead, and a season in which the V8 Racing Corvette of Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos, you would anticipate, is going to be one of those cars that could be challenging for the championship overall. Looks like it's going to be a flying formation finish as well for the V8 Racing team, because Rick Abresh, his teammate, has been caught by Pastorelli on this final lap of the race. So through the final turn goes Nicky Pastorelli. He plants his right foot, accelerates up over the brow. The checker flag is ready and waiting, and it's victory in the 3rd race of the 2013 International GT Open for V8 Racing's Corvette of Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos. 2nd place, a fantastic drive for the Vlorba course Ferrari pairing of Luca Filippi and Andrea Montermini. They did everything that they possibly could. Handshakes abound for the Corvette squad, as well they might. Now, Carlos Vieira is due to be the next man through to claim GTS class honours. Here he comes now out of the final turn. It's been an excellent day for the Nova driver team, and it is Vieira and Cesar Campanico who finished 3rd in the race overall, win the GTS class, with 2nd in the GTS class Alexei Baisov and Alessandro Pierre Guidi, and they claim 4th. And then in 5th position, Alexander Stalkenitzer, senior and junior. They complete the Super GT podium, and then 6th, completing the GTS podium, is Jan Seyfarth and Miguel Toril in the Seyfarth Mercedes. Absolutely end-to-end action in this race, with such a disrupted early start, and then when the race unfolded, the strategies came into play, tyre management came into play, and also some head-down charging drives came into play as drivers sought to make up the gaps on their rivals. Ombra Racing exchange handshakes on the pit wall as their man Alvaro Barber has brought the number 60 car home in 8th position. Alexander Taukanitsa Senior, not only did he complete the Super GT podium, but he also wins the Gentleman Drivers Trophy as well for the 2nd race in a row, having also claimed that honour at Paul Ricard last time out. And Taukanitsa's getting faster and faster as Pastorelli enjoys the applause of the marshals, enjoys that wonderful feeling of bringing the car round on the final slowing down lap to the Parc Ferme, knowing that he's won the race. And here Miguel Ramos has done everything perfectly. So let's take a look at the final results with the victory for Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli. 2nd place for Andrea Monterni and Luca Filippi. Monterni bringing the gap down to 9.9 seconds. In the end, Cesar Campanico and Carlos Vieira finish 3rd and win the GTS class, from Alexei Basov and Alessandro Pierguidi in 4th. The Taukanitsas then 5th, completing the Super GT podium, and Miguel Torrell and Jan Seyfarth 6th and completing the GTS podium, from Isaac Tutmulu, Dimitris Deverakos. Very, very lively race, and unfortunately some casualties along the way. That nasty first lap incident between Marco Seefried and Francesco Castellacci brought out the first safety car. The demise of Rafael Unzarazaga brought out the 2nd. Matteo Beretta unfortunately came worse off in an altercation with Diedrich Schutthoff, and that led to his retirement. So in terms of the Drivers' Championship, it means that Andrea Monterni and Luca Filippi move to the head of the standings, head of the Epson, Enzo Ide and Maxime Soule, the Taukanitsas up into 3rd position. Well, this is what Miguel Ramos wanted, the Portuguese driver claiming a home victory. And Ramos has been very tense all weekend. He wanted this win. The free practice, the testing, all suggested that the Corvette stood a very, very good chance of doing so today. Qualifying echoed that, and their race has run to absolute perfection. Andrea Monterni and Luca Filippi, well, they have driven as hard as they possibly can in the Valour course. Ferrari 458 have done brilliantly well as Pastorelli and Monterni exchange handshakes. And then the drivers will shortly make their way up to the podium, where of course we always have the 2 podiums for the race overall, and then for GTS as well. And Seyfarth, not surprisingly, getting the handshakes from his team too, because that was a storming drive from Seyfarth on up the order. Same goes for Alessandro Pierguidi and Alexei Basov in the Ester Motorsports Ferrari to finish 2nd in the GTS class on their debut appearance. It's driver pairing in the International GT Open, absolutely superb. Well, the sun beating down here at Portimao, and the drivers, well, they can enjoy the spoils of victory in today's race briefly, but of course they have it all to do tomorrow. 50 minutes of action to look forward to that will bring the 2nd round of the 2013 International GT Open to a close as Carlos Vieira extricates himself from his Audi R8, removes the earplugs, shakes hands with Cesar Campanico, and 3rd in the race overall and being on the GTS podium. Remarkable. So let's take a look at the highlights of a dramatic race. When it did get underway, it was very, very crowded into the first turn, with Luca Filippi being squeezed. It gave Alexander Taukanitsa Jr. the opportunity to jump to the fore of the field, with Miguel Ramos slipping down into 3rd. But then look at this, Marco Seefried lost control, ramming Francesco Castellacci. Fortunately, both drivers uninjured, but it did bring out the safety car. Stefano Constantini very much in the early action, as once Luca Filippi had taken the lead of the race, he tried to build an advantage, but when the pit window opened, Ramos was in early to hand over to Nicky Pastorelli. Isaac Tutmulu and Chris van der Drift had a super scrap immediately after their pit stops, as at the very, very back end of the pit window, Filippi was in to hand over to Andrea Monterni. Freddie Kramer left the pits exuberantly, and Filippi, having given over to Monterni, left Andrea with a lot of work to do. That brilliant move around the outside of Carlos Vieira was followed by this move to the inside of Alexander Taukanitsa Senior to promote the Valour Ferrari into 2nd. For another Ferrari, it was a more disappointing end to the day. Johnny Larson spearing off into the gravelers Michele Rugolo set about climbing his way on up through the order as well. There's always plenty of action to be found on track, but through it all, it was Nicky Pastorelli and Miguel Ramos who were in command of the race really throughout. They managed the strategy perfectly. They did everything that they needed to do, to the delight of the V8 Racing team and all of the Corvette supporters. They claim their first victory of the year. Thumbs up from Ramos, huge grin from Nicky Pastorelli as first of all, third place on the rostrum, Cesar Campanico and Carlos Vieira. Second position for Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi, who give the thumbs up and leap on to the podium. And then our race winners here in the first race, the second round in Portimao, Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli. Sweet home victory for Miguel Ramos. Waves, receives the applause from all the teams assembled down in the pit lane. A very popular victory, and also the crowd on their feet in the grandstands. V8 Racing team principal also onto the top step of the rostrum, celebrating being the winning team. National anthem completed, on to the presentation of the trophies with, as ever, International GT Open, very, very nice trophies for all the podium finishers. Montermini and Filippi getting their trophies for being runners-up, and then I think again we can see celebrations from Pastorelli and Ramos as they hoist their winners' trophies aloft on the rostrum. And now the race to the champagne bottle starts in earnest. V8 Racing get the team's trophy, and now the champagne fight begins on the rostrum. Very happy drivers, and Ramos douses the team. Yeah, Ramos delighted with that super drive from him, really keeping a very, very cool head in the early stages of the race. Now that the champagne fight is completed on the rostrum, opportunity to pose for a couple of quick photos for the drivers. It's all looking a little bit crowded up there, but somehow they'll all get in the frame for the cameraman. So we take the opportunity to enjoy some super slow motion replays of these cars having to work very, very hard here today at Portimao with the heat in the track and in the Dunlop tyres. Having to work very, very hard, all getting a little bit slippery. Andrea Montermini and Luca Filippi doing everything just right, heads down, charging, super performance for the Vallorba course. Ferrari, and the same going for Miguel Ramos and Nicky Pastorelli. Perfectly managed race, did everything exactly as it should be, and they have claimed their first win of the year. On to then the GTS class podium, with first of all in third position drivers just waiting to be announced on to the rostrum. So first of all, we have got Jan Seyfarth and Miguel Toril. Second, Alexei Baysov and Alessandro Pierguidi. And then class winners once more, Portuguese flag on the rostrum, Carlos Vieira and Cesar Campanico claiming GTS class victory here at Portimao alongside third in the race overall. It's always such a celebratory atmosphere at the end of these races, particularly these longer races. National anthems complete. Time then for the presentation of the trophies in the GTS class. So first of all, the third place trophies for Miguel Toril and Jan Seyfarth. Second place for Alessandro Pierguidi and Alexei Baysov. And then class winner trophies. It's going to be a very, very full mantelpiece for them, isn't it? Carlos Vieira and Cesar Campanico, who had a brilliant race for the Nova driver team in their Audi R8, and they quite rightly celebrate on the rostrum. So as the drivers reach for the champagne, it's just about time from myself, Ben Evans, to say, hope that you thoroughly enjoyed the action from Portimao today. We will look forward to your company tomorrow when we have the second race of the weekend. But from now until the race gets underway tomorrow, we'll say goodbye and we'll look forward to more of the same with the sun beating down on the Portimao circuit.